So good afternoon and welcome back to the channel, hope you're doing well, and today I want to talk about rumination. Do you ever play through bad events and scenarios inside your mind and then loop them round continuously until they make you feel like shit and affect your happiness? Or do you ever worry about the future? Do you imagine bad scenarios or engage in catastrophic thinking and then again, play them through continuously inside your mind so that you kind of work yourself up into, an angst-ridden frenzy? Well, if you ever do either of those, then that's a thing called rumination. And in this video, I want to share with you a couple of quick tips to help you stop doing this. Hi, I'm Stephen Burns from Mind School, and today I want to talk about rumination. So before we kick off, if you're new to the channel, if you could consider subscribing, that would be absolutely fantastic. Also, if you're interested in mindset training, if you want to learn how to run your mind more effectively, then I have an entirely free online course called Train Your Brain for Permanent Positive Change. So I'll include a link to that course in the first comment below. So let's get started. What actually is rumination? Well, rumination is where we engage in some kind of negative thought pattern and then we loop it around continuously over and over again without any kind of closure, any kind of end point, and it can sometimes drive us a little bit nuts. And in general, there's two different types of rumination. First of all, we have past rumination. So this is where if something undesirable happens, we have some kind of bad event in our life, and we then just replay that event over and over and over and over inside our minds, feeling really bad about it continuously. A classic example for this is if you've been in an argument, some kind of conflict, some kind of fight. It's bad enough to have the argument in of itself, but what we often do is we ruminate. We play that argument over and over again inside our mind, and we just end up getting angry over and over again, sometimes for days, weeks, months, potentially even years. So that's past rumination. What we can also have is future-based rumination. And this is where we play through scenarios in the future. We imagine bad things potentially happening to us. We engage in sometimes catastrophic thinking. If we take, for example, worry, that's a great example of future-based rumination, where we worry about bad things happening in the future and we kind of loop it round and loop it round until it makes us, feel like shit. So rumination is something that I can tend to do from time to time. I don't really do the future-based one. I don't really worry about the future that much, but I do have a habit every now and again to do past rumination. For me, it tends to happen at night time. There's that much going on during the day. There's not really much mental space for anything else. But when things calm down and maybe I'm lying in bed at night or I wake up in the middle of the night, that's often where if something has happened that I don't really like, I might go over it quite a few times inside my mind and obsess with it a little bit too much. So I guess the key question is, how do you actually stop it? How do you relieve it? How do you move forward? Well, there's quite a bit to this, but I want to give you a couple of quick strategies that can really make a big difference. It can give you some quick wins. So the first strategy is to appreciate the absurdness of ruminating in the first place. Now, I do get that this might seem a little bit insensitive at face value, but it really does work. Anytime we take the piss out of our own problems, then it lessens the impact of them. It makes us feel better about our situation. And that's because humour dissolves tension. I've got a friend who's a stand-up comedian and he's had lots of problems and he's gone to therapy for quite a few years and it didn't really work for him. But the thing that really worked for him was when he actually turned his problems into comedy sketches. So he kind of used the act of being a stand-up comedian as a cathartic and therapeutic experience. And by turning his problems into comedy sketches, it just changed the way that he thought about them. It changed the way that he felt about them. It lessened their impact because humour is tremendously powerful. So I think it's useful to appreciate just how absurd it is to play through, movie after movie inside your mind of bad things having happened or might happen in the future. The analogy I like to remind myself of that really helps me with this is it's a little bit like if you were to go to the cinema and watch a really terrible movie, something like Taken 2 starring Liam Neeson. Definitely didn't deserve a sequel. Or I went to see a film called The Assassin. Honestly, the critics gave it it amazing reviews and it was utterly terrible. Just didn't get it at all. But it's kind of like going to see a film and you absolutely hate it, you think it's terrible, and then deciding to go and watch that film 100 times a day just to torture yourself. You wouldn't do that in reality, would you? So why do you do it inside your mind? So for me, when I just kind of like remind myself of that analogy, it lets me appreciate the absurdness of ruminating in the first place, and it just seems to lessen the impact and actually sometimes even stops me from doing it completely. So that's the first strategy. The second strategy, I want to focus on this one a bit more, and that's where you deal with the real reason why we ruminate in the first place. Because the reason why we ruminate is because we're looking to learn something from a situation that's ongoing for us. Rumination tends to happen when we don't have closure. You know, anytime something bad happens, then the brain starts to play through it inside your mind in the form of pictures and movies and scenarios in order to learn something so that it can then move forward and get some kind of closure. The brain hates open loops. You know, if you ever watch like one of these programs on Netflix, they always end with an open loop, some sort of cliffhanger, and you're desperate to then figure out what's going on in the next episode. This is something called the Zeigarnik effect. So if we are playing through this scenario inside our mind and we're not learning something from it, then guess what happens? The brain keeps on searching for that learning so that it can then close the loop and then move forward. So the real key to stopping rumination, to halting it in its tracks, is to look at it as a learning experience. It's not just something you're playing through just to piss yourself off or just to break your day. It's actually your brain attempting to figure something out that can actually improve you and move you forward. So you want to genuinely look on the scenario that you're playing through as a learning experience, and you then want to ask yourself this question here. What is there to learn here that would create some kind of closure and would allow me to let this go? And you don't want to just give this question lip service. You really want to consider it inside your imagination and see if you can feel the answers. Because when you really learn something useful from this scenario, that's when the brain starts to get the closure, and that allows you to let it go and the rumination just stops. So another little step you can add in here, once you get some kind of learning from whatever it is you're playing through inside your mind, if you then project that learning into the future, so if you ask yourself, how could I actually use that learning to make me a better human being, to make me deal with that situation a little bit better in the future, and then actually imagine inside your mind putting that learning into practice. If you can do that's just an amazing step, because again, it gives the brain the signal that it's learned something so that you can let it go and then move on. At the end of the day, if you can take a bad experience or a bad event and then turn it into some sort of positive learning experience, then it's going to halt rumination in its tracks, because you've addressed the real reason why you ruminate in the first place, so the brain doesn't have to search anymore. So that's two strategies you can try out. So let's do a quick summary, a quick review. First of all, you want to appreciate the absurdness of ruminating in the first place. Remember that analogy about going to see a terrible film and then watching it hundreds of times a day? You wouldn't do that in reality, so why would you do it inside your own mind? Just appreciating the absurdness can actually lessen the impact and really change your relationship and give you that different perspective. Then you want to search for the learning. The reason why we ruminate is because we're looking for some sort of learning to get closure so that we can move on. So what would be something that you could learn here that would give you that closure and would allow you to let this go and move on? And then once you've got that learning, project it into the future. How can you actually use that in your day-to-day life to make your life better, to make you better? And when you get a sense of this, it gives the brain a signal that it's done its job, it's served the purpose of rumination, and it can just halt it in its tracks, and you can then let it go and move on. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Do you ruminate? What strategies, what tips do you have? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, I would love it if you could. It really does help promote the channel and get these videos out there. So have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you later on.